an unknown quantity like myself.
Oh, that's not true.
What's that?
That's true. A lot of people saw you last year.
A few people, yeah. So welcome. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Come on, make yourself at home.
You want to sit in the back?
Well, there's a chair. Or if you want privacy, you can sit in my office.
There you go. She's all set.
The question I was asking myself as I was trying to think what I want to say. This is huge for me, all right? You'll see what I mean. How does a new idea get going? You get a few good people together, so we can put a check mark on that one. We've got some good people here. I know some of you, I'm happy to say. I'm a newcomer to town, so I have precious few people who I can identify. I'm really grateful to see you here. So a few good people. An idea takes off when the time is right, and I'm going to argue that this is a very interesting time for the kinds of things that we'll be discussing. And then you persist. You only lose when you give up. So the idea is, I don't know if anybody have a chance to look at the website? It's my first website. I'm really happy. I'm really excited. Finally joining the 21st century. The idea is a series, not just a one-off, but that we can get together and meet on a regular basis. And Claire Nader couldn't be here tonight. She's taking, I think, the first vacation in 40 years. So something like that. But her feeling is, if we can get people together, meeting on a regular basis, that's when something happens. Talking to each other, sharing our knowledge, learning from each other. So that's the persistence part. And I'm just going to go on. To introduce myself a little bit. I've worked for many years, and starting off at the low end, and then eventually, by good fortune, learned how to program computers. And this was in the late 70s, when not that many people could do it, when you hardly had any computer science degrees, at least not in, if you did, they were at universities. So, for the first time in my life, I made some decent money. And I used it to get myself back to school, because I have a scholarly inclination. But that period in the workforce created the questions that would later turn into my research. Why is it, this was late 70s, throughout the 80s, why is it that my country is giving away its manufacturing capacity? What are we going to be when we stop producing for ourselves? And this was visible to a lot of us way back then. And it's, now we know what we're going to be. We're going to be much poorer and much more worried and fearful and importing the things that we need from someplace else. So I brought those kind of questions to my research. I looked at industrialization from the very beginning to the heyday, to deindustrialization, or capital flight, or whichever, or offshoring, many phrases we use now to describe the phenomenon. And I wrote a book on my research in upstate New York, and that's how I connected with the Naders. Because Laura Nader, I don't know if you know this, is Claire and Ralph's sister, is an anthropologist at University of California, Berkeley. So she thought well of the book and sent it to Claire, and here we are a few years later. So I came the end of 2011, November 2011, and met a few of you at that time. And Claire said, well, did I want to come back? And I did. So, kind of the short version, but just a little bit of feeling for who this person is up here. So the idea is we are in an unstable and crisis-prone period. This is a partial list of some of the issues we're all facing. Now I'm going to be maybe a little bit heavy-handed about the crisis stuff, because my feeling, and in myself and in other people I've talked to, I feel inhibited to talk about, hi, welcome. Do we need another chair?
Chair over here on the
Yeah, sure.
There's one up here in front, and I could grab one from the back. There's coffee, tea, all kinds of good things. Kathy, hi Kathy. I know some names from the list and so on. I feel like there's a inhibition against talking about the level of crisis that a lot of us are perceiving, or so many things kind of going wrong. And I don't want to dwell on it, but I want to use that as a motivation for trying some innovative ways to resist decline at the community level by coming together as members of the community. So, among other things, a jobless recovery. Anybody think jobs are all just about to come back and we're all going to be well paid like we were wherever, whenever? I don't see any movement in that direction whatsoever.
No, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, no. I mean, it's, yeah. I mean, what were they thinking? But, okay, so we have government, and these are interrelated phenomena, by the way. A government that's deeply in debt. By the way, anyone offer a comment? I want to sort of talk and have you talk rather than I do a long spiel and you ask questions at the end. So feel free to interject, and occasionally I'll stop and say, what do you think? I suppose we'll see what happens. One thing I study, I trained as an economic anthropologist. I'm not an economist. In fact, economic anthropology, since the dawn of its existence about 100 years ago, has been in a, I was going to say, dialogue with economics, but it's worse than that, in a critical counter or anti-economics position. And not to say economics is all bad, but it's been used to justify things like a jobless recovery and things like high-stakes gamblers running the economy. And by that, I mean the bankers who seem to be in such a position of power in our society that they can say, we blew it, now you, the people, have to cover our gambling debts. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of social power. Both of our presidential candidates in the recent election were heavily funded by exactly these same people. So, interesting situation that I think we ignore at our peril. Interrelated, endless war. We are out and about in the United States threatening people of many countries. Now, perhaps there are some kinds of justifications. I think the most important justifications are unspoken, and we can get into that if anybody wants to. We have, as we know, insolvent towns, and Stockton, California just declared bankruptcy. Did anybody pick up on that? Yeah. That's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. I feel confident we won't have to do that in Winston, but I suppose that is one option. Bad food. I personally don't want to have roach genes in my tomatoes. I don't feel like eating that. And I want to know. I have a button that says, I have a right to know. But it's
Can I interrupt for a second on that?
totally.
The Connecticut General Assembly, the Public Health Committee, just passed the GMO thing in Connecticut. So it got out of committee, right? Got out of committee, so that's good. So it has some other steps to go through. It has to go through the full House, which I think it's going to pass the House. It might have a little trouble in the Senate. But the point is, if you want, there's activity in Litchfield County, and there's going to be activity in Winston on the anti-GMO, or at least, and not only not having GMO in the food, but at least labeling it if there is going to be, so you can make a choice.
What is GMO?
Genetically modified organisms.
Thank you.
Yeah, otherwise,
I knew I wasn't
genetically
the only one.
engineered, some say GMO, some say GE. I noticed with
Right.
FDA, they tend to say GE, genetically engineered.
So much of our food is already.
And it's not just where the genes come from, by the way, that those genes reach their targets.
But you know, we're working on something here. We're trying to make something happen
Yeah.
for consumers on that.
These genes work towards their target positions through some sort of transport vector, which is typically a virus, which is one of the theories of why people we can't seem to get a good scientific test on this, but people who have allergies experience much greater incidence of allergic reaction when they eat genetically modified. So anyway, nobody voted for this, right? Nobody voted for pesticides even in covering our food. So the idea is, here's a man who knows something about food.
I think you talked to Sue about this. Our President Obama just signed legislation protecting Monsanto
Yes.
and their GMO creation.
Yes, folks.
Right, so if
That's what
You know,
I'm
it's a
saying.
rider onto a bill that was to prevent government shutdown. Sneaky.
They always sneak it in.
Yeah,
They sneak it in. And this has been going on. This is not new,
Yeah,
by the way.
so your opinion is that he really didn't know it, or is that just a story?
No, I think he's appointed, he's made sure that the FDA and his cabinet have Monsanto representatives. I think he perfectly well knows it. I'm sorry to say I did vote for him the first time, but I've become the opposite of a fan of Mr. President Obama. But that's just my personal opinion. Shouldn't have any effect on what's going on in this group. So all of these problems in our society that are putting us in this increasingly crisis-prone position seem to come from a kind of power that is sitting above the democratic process. So here's the critical question. Is anybody up there in government or in corporations going to look out for small communities?
No.
No. If anybody wants to argue to the contrary, I'd love to hear it, but
Not unless they want to turn the squeeze into China.
yeah.
I would even go so far as to argue when you say you voted for him the first time but you don't like him the second time. Every time I go to that argument, I say it doesn't matter.
If you
a symbol.
voted.
No, it's a symbol. He's a symbol. He has no power.
It's true.
It's the people that put him there.
It's true. I think that's true, and it's been true for several presidencies now.
I think that the joke was when Ronald Reagan took presidency because he showed us that the president is truly an actor. Playing a role.
I would certainly date it. I would date it from that same moment myself. But we've also had, I mean, if you go further back in time, we've also had presidents who were the favorite of a clique of powerful men who, McKinley is an interesting case in 1896, one of my favorite stories. So, all right, if nobody is going to look after us in small communities, then what are we going to do? And I want to say we have maybe more choice, but we've got three that I can think of. We can get used to the decline. We can get used to our food getting worse. We can get used to feeling worse. We can get used to less access to more expensive health care. I wish public health insurance in the United States was going to improve our health care situation. It's not clear to me that that's going to be the case, but
How does store food in the basement and barricade ourselves in our house?
all right. Well,
Why does it have
okay.
to go together?
all right, because
Why
here,
can't we
because
store
wait a
food
second.
in
No,
the
all right,
compound
you're
room?
absolutely right. You're absolutely
I
right.
mean,
I
can we
should
grow
have-
gardens? Can we store food and not
Yes, I want to
necessarily
say
barricade
we need to
ourselves?
grow gardens. Absolutely need to grow gardens. I didn't put the key word here, and I should have. And this is not a put down, but prepper would be the key word, or it used to be survivalist. One,
Can we do that? I mean,
I'm
is
not.
that so far-fetched?
No, it's not far
Does
fetched.
anybody cook
The
down
reason
chicken soup with their bones anymore?
I do.
Okay. Is that in the same kind of idea?
But what I wanted to say with that third choice is, so we can either get used to decline, or we can pull into our immediate family household situation and try to protect ourselves. And I pay attention to the prepper and survivalist people because oftentimes they've got a very keen analysis of the problems going on in the outer world, but it's a response. I mean, I don't care how much food you've got stored in your basement. If push comes to shove, you are going to run out at some point. So better to know how to pull food from the earth in the good old-fashioned natural way, which I know a little bit, but and some people, Dorothy, I think is pretty great. Charlene's a great gardener, but I would say many people, and myself included, could stand to learn a whole lot more about that, and that's one of the things we might undertake as a group of interested folks. Or number 3 is to try to organize kinds of things that are going to work in a positive direction to help us better take care of ourselves, to sort of push against the decline. And there's, we'll get to this later on, I'll talk about this as we proceed, but there's actually a big movement under many different names. Relocalization is one, transition towns is another, where people are organizing on a local level, face-to-face, people who know each other and potentially can trust each other, trying to do all kinds of things in this direction. So I don't have a handy buzzword right now. I think maybe we'll, in time it'll develop. But at this point there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things. And the key to it is face-to-face. The key to it is people we know bringing their skills and their resources and their energy together to try to do things that fill a need in their communities on a small scale. So, number 3. But I think the consequences are not good. This is a picture from the Great Depression of the 30s. Probably iconic, probably people have seen it before, but these tent cities are now. This one in the left-hand side is Seattle, the right-hand side is Colorado Springs. But there's it's a little bit less than it was in 2010, 2011. There was a huge effusion of tent cities all over the United States, and it was very hard to find out about. It's not something you read about in the papers, and it's something that towns felt as an embarrassment and tried to, quote, clean up and do something with these people. But it's a measure of the desperation to which a lot of our fellows have been pushed in these creepy conditions of this time.
We have one in our own town here.
What's that?
We have a little tent city in our own town here.
Really?
I headed up towards Norfolk on the left, the dry dam.
Oh, good.
Right over that hill is a tent city
Oh, I
right there.
didn't even know.
Yeah.
And are they...
It's been there for 30 years.
Yep.
It's not new, it's been there for 30
Okay.
years.
But are they harassed, or is it pretty much an agreement that
Apparently not, if they've
No.
been there for 30 years.
yeah,
they're not
as long
harassed.
as
Yeah.
Right?
It's well known.
yeah, interesting.
You know what the biggest problem with tent cities is that the people that are there really don't have a choice. And when I lived in Willimantic, we ran into a problem. There was this small homeless man with his dog who lived down by the Willimantic River. He lived here for years. And the police came and he tore down his tent, threw all his stuff out and everything, and he lost everything.
Yeah.
That's not the solution. I think that the towns should understand that those people who are in those environments, they already have hard enough time. They don't even have to be harassed by the police, especially since he was doing nothing to bother the police.
Yeah, and it's an easy target. But one thing I learned in upstate New York, among many things, was that how people got through the Depression in the 30s up there was people who had land allowed their neighbors to camp out on it. Their neighbors who had lost everything.
So people will do that here.
And so this old guy that I worked with was saying, you know, for the next Depression, and he's deceased now, he fully expected there would be a next one. He said people are so selfish now they won't let people camp out on their land, and that was one of his big concerns. So I hope that's not the case. And so my idea is, especially for tonight, all right, what I had in mind for tonight as the start off of something that I hope is going to keep going on and on, look at a few indicators of the difficult situation that we're dealing with, all right, I'll put it that way. Because I think if you listen to the news, it's like everybody should be happy because we've got 0.1% better unemployment rate this month. There's this feeling, and this is one of the things a lot of people who are not from here observe about the United States, is we've got this strange sort of optimism. It's almost taboo to discuss in many contexts how bad things are. So I want to take tonight to talk about how bad things are. Just, again, as a motivation, because I don't think we have a choice but to begin to work together at the community level. And so, as a motivation. Now, I found these great charts on the State Department of Labor website. Great because they give you a nice long time trajectory. This is from 1990 to the present. This is one of the most dramatic, but there are a couple of them dramatic. This is, can you see? This is manufacturing, and defined broadly as basically what you call value added, taking raw materials and making something out of them. We're not doing that anymore, or barely. Now I'm going to go through there. I think I have 7 of these. There were more on the website. It's really interesting. I'll put the link up on our website, which I'll show you in a minute. Note, keep in the background of your mind as you go through this, the level of population change, which is not that great. We've increased roughly 8.5% over this period of time. So population increase does not seem to be in any way a driver of what we're seeing with these job figures. So note the dramatic decline. I don't know if you can see these little tiny numbers, but up in 1990, we're looking at about 310,000 manufacturing jobs in the state of Connecticut. Now, we're just barely on the chart with maybe 90,000-ish. Maybe, yeah. There's just a little bit of green down there at the bottom. Information sector. Now, some of you are old enough to remember, as I do, when it was announced from on high that the United States was entering the new information economy, and high tech was the way we were going to go, and we were going to be knowledge workers, and so on and so on. Well, information has not done well. It did have a few good moments in the early 2000s, but this is our current situation. The information economy is just a bit over 30,000 jobs in the state. Construction sector is interesting as an indicator of economic activity in general.
Interesting graph.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place, but we've lost a phenomenal number of construction jobs since, what is this nodal year? Is that 08? This was the crash was 07, 08. I call it a crash. Other people might have different, kinder ways to put it, gentler ways to put it, but I think crash is
Where was
appropriate.
it at its high point in 2008?
Yeah.
2008, but these are on different scales, so that's 70,000 jobs in
Because,
2008.
quite frankly, construction, of buildings, my husband was in construction.
Yeah.
And it was he was unemployed almost all of the 1990s, during 2000 to 2000, the whole time Clinton was in, he had a job. Okay? As soon as that, of course, then the bump burst anyway, and it was rolling layoffs from then on. And finally, I just said,
That's painful.
I finally said to him, "You're 6 months away from being 62. We'll take your 401k and we'll just
We'll
live
find a
through
way.
that
Yeah.
and make it to 62 because, you know, it depends on whether you're talking roads or buildings. The buildings.
Yeah, and
are
this graph includes both.
Yeah, yeah,
is-
because when he worked doing like Jersey barriers or stuff like that, then he was working 60 hours a week. But if it was buildings,
Yeah,
yeah, because there was no building of manufacturing or
yeah.
new headquarters or anything like that.
Would he have worked in, if you were, say, rehabbing an old factory building, would he have been called in on a job like that, or?
Yeah, well, he was actually worked on some buildings in Hartford that modernized some of the old buildings.
Yeah,
He worked on.
so I'm just thinking, is that gonna be included in this, and it probably
Yeah,
is.
it probably is.
I mean, we're building rich, it seems to me. I mean, look at Winston,
have
we got
empty buildings
great,
all over.
built environment, great spaces.
Mhm. But of course, this could be corrected if we could actually get money to fix roads and bridges.
Yeah, well, I mean, 7/8 of this building is actually, needs large sums of money to be
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, it's like, but then again, this is just like almost all of Winston. You look around at all the patchy buildings show, wear and tear on them.
Yeah. And at the worst, maybe what we don't see in terms of the toxics
Right.
that are in and around and under those spaces. Oh, there is maybe I shouldn't bring this up since I don't know much about it, but the state has a brownfields remediation authority which does fund local projects, and I'm sure there are people in the town who've looked into that, but
Which brings a very good question, which I'm sure you'll probably answer in a little bit, which is what can we do to turn this around?
yeah, well, that's why. So I want to sort of talk about the problems and make the case that I don't think there's a lot. There are things we can do, and we can't give up working at the state and the federal level. But in terms of our quality of life, I think we're going to have to take that into our own hands to a large extent.
Because one thing also, your graphs, I wonder if it also includes the disabled. Because, we live on a disability income. I say we because I am legally blind. Yet, we don't get really much. But we also are, of course, a major part of the consumer market, too. But a lot of us don't want to sit there collecting a government pension. We want to work.
Yeah.
But there's no jobs either because...
That's it. So can we create them? I think we can.
I gave you a couple suggestions on the phone, which
Can we hold that off to the next part of the discussion?
I certainly will.
Thanks. Let me just get through the depressing part. All right. So trade, transportation, and utilities. Similar story. Took a real dive in the crash of 2008. And, obviously, if there's not a lot of other economic activity going on, you don't need a lot of transportation. So that's all. And this also includes utility services.
When you say utility services, what do you mean by that exactly?
Oh, they mean gas, electricity, steam. Where's my thing? I'm stuck with their definitions. Electric power, natural gas, steam supply, water supply, and sewerage.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of the whole deal. So where have we picked up jobs? Leisure and hospitality. Waitresses and, sadly, no. Information sector's way down. Leisure and hospitality. Waitresses, and bartenders have been on the rise. Fewer people seem to be cooking for themselves. We do see more restaurants, oddly enough. And this also includes cultural entertainment and so on. But by and large, unless you're a rock star, these are low-paying jobs. These are, I don't know, I've worked the restaurant business. If your waiter or waitress at a restaurant is not even making minimum wage because the calculation is the tip income will make up the difference. Well, on a good night, maybe so. On a bad night, maybe not. So these are Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's about a 45% increase since 1990. Look at this graph, man. This is like steady, straight uphill. And this is educational and health services. Education, training, healthcare, and social assistance. This has been a major growth sector. But again, most of these are not well-paying jobs. As the healthcare system has shifted, we see people working. It works out for people who try to be cared for, who are chronically ill, to be cared for in their homes. But home healthcare workers, as you may know, it's seriously underpaid for the responsibilities and the duties of those jobs.
I have a conspiracy theory that, in fact,
Go for it.
that is that's one of the things that this government is creating is sick people in this nation. For that very reason.
And you're a man who knows the food end of it. I think we are undernourished, and petroleum-based agriculture
But I think
has
there's knowledge
depleted
behind
our soils.
Right.
So we're not getting the nutrients that we used to get from our food.
But I don't think it's ignorance. I think that, somewhere in some back room they had a meeting and they said, let's not remove that substance because it gets people good and sick. I really believe that.
Well, I mean, how many people know about the GDP as a measure of economic activity? Yeah, we've all heard about the gross domestic product, right? It used to be GNP, which they still calculate GNP. It's a little bit different, a little bit more realistic, but GDP is the one that seems to have all of the major financial policy based on it. GDP is a completely sort of blind measure of every transaction that goes on in the society. So the more sick people you've got, the higher your GDP. I got tuned on into this when, remember the Exxon Valdez some time back?
Yeah.
The Exxon Valdez added some $12 billion to the GDP. And I'm like, wait a second. Yeah. So alcoholism is better than sobriety for the GDP. Chronic illness is great for the GDP. And we need to remember Lyme disease. Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
Lyme disease is great for the GDP.
Cancer.
Yeah. Cancer, chronic illnesses, diabetes, great for the GDP. So I think we need to be informed and suspicious about the nature of the GDP and the pluses and minuses involved in that computation. So yeah.
Well, you're not a conspiracy theorist. I read and 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 I've joined these organizations, but look into the foundations, the Rockefellers and all the meetings that they had, and its drug companies and what they put in the food in Monsanto, and you're not off the key at all.
It begins to sound like a money laundering system, doesn't it?
Yeah, if they want it, that's also a way of owning the population to fear and sickness.
Yeah.
And the drug companies are owned by these big, major families.
It's going to look their jobs for the pharmaceuticals. They go in and out of the government, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican. They loop in and out.
Yeah, and they'll hide things like in the Patriot Act. Read that, what they hid for the drug companies so they can continue to poison us. But just as an aside, read the book by Lee Iacocca. He found the cure for diabetes, and he said, I'm the establishment. I am the establishment. And they wouldn't let him bring it to market.
Yeah, well,
Because it makes too much money for their, the
Big pharma.
Cancer Society, diabetes.
What's
Look
the name
into
of the
that
book?
if you
What's
want to
the
see
book
the
called?
truth. Read Lee Iacocca, he was the head of Chrysler. He found the cure because his wife died of diabetes. Tried to bring it to market, and he has all kinds of power, and they shut him down. He was up against the American Medical Society, the Diabetes Society, and believe it or not, the Cancer Society. He said they make too much money.
That was in his memoirs. What was it called?
No, that was Where Have All the Good Leaders? Where Have All the Leaders Gone? Something like that. I'm sorry.
Where are all the good leaders?
Yeah.
I wrote a book called Systems Out of Balance, and what I'd like to contribute to that is that conspiracy theories, true or not, the way systems are structured, that thing is going to happen. The systems of large mass societies are such that those things are going to happen. It doesn't matter whether there's conspiracy theory to it or not. Corporations do what they are supposed to do. Nation states do what they are supposed to do. Interest groups do what they are supposed to do. And so that's why a meeting like this is very important, because the antidote of large mass societies isn't to try to do what try to beat large mass societies at their own game, but to put your investment into what small band societies can do, what communities can do.
Yeah.
That's how you can beat the game.
Yeah.
You know, what I was going to say was this, you know, we talked, what you guys are talking about is, you know, who is the biggest companies right now who are making the most amount of money that we nail with every day? Big Pharma and Big Food. Big Pharma, for example, likes to push mental health drugs. And we saw what has happened with certain drugs and side effects. And some of the side effects includes increasing obesity, which increases diabetes,
Right.
which also creates liver failure, as well as having people flip out and go out there and shooting sprees, which of course is good for the gun people too, because they're selling lots of bullets, both for defense and offensive.
But Kirk's saying you don't have to have a conspiracy behind it. They're following the trend because
It's a trend. Because I believe
they feel their mandate is to make money for their shareholders, and the bigger they are and the more monopolistic they are.
right.
You know.
And on top of that, let's not forget that they all are involved with the Illuminati, which includes the Rothschilds and many others, to make money. See, they see us as sheep, and that's the problem. When you got people seeing the American consumer as, go ahead, eat all you want, we'll make more. Oh, don't worry about your liver problems. We'll give you a pill for that. You know, it's like.
Well, that's my point about the GDP. So you don't need to have. You might, and you might, short of a conspiracy, you might say, "Oh gosh, look at all the money we're making off diabetes drugs." Well, let's don't cut the sugar in Kellogg's cornflakes. You know, you don't.
But
Yeah.
we're so addicted to sugar, for example, that most people would never want to eat cornflakes with no sugar.
I got a table laden with sugar over here.
That's why frosted flakes are a big seller.
Because everybody likes it. So this is actually it's a huge job increase in this sector. About an 80% job increase for an 8% population increase. It's pretty impressive.
But the thing is, the Connecticut has an aging population, and you have to look at that. That's no conspiracy theory.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not
Because
suggesting
they're
conspiracy.
living
I'm saying,
longer.
look what's happening. We're trading
older.
good jobs for bad jobs.
Yeah, right.
Basically,
But what I'm
overall.
saying is, that's because, and part of it is because people are living older, and so you end up with people in the health services field. And a lot of it's geriatrics.
Yeah, I've heard that some 80% of a person's healthcare spending is in the last few
6 months or something.
It's crazy.
There's nothing wrong with helping old people. I mean, that should go hand in hand with manufacturing jobs. But
Yeah.
what you're just saying is this is where the jobs are going. And
Yeah.
no manufacturing. There's no
Because,
nothing
I mean,
wrong
it's-
with making life better as people get older. There
Not
should
at
be
all.
jobs for the young.
And but if
And they should pay equally.
we
Yeah,
had
yeah,
good manufacturing
yeah.
jobs, then
Yeah.
people could maybe take better care of their
Well,
aging
sure,
parents,
of
and you know, so it's all. Now, if people can't take good care of their aging parents, then they tend to be out needing social assistance, and so this sector is just.
Sure.
It's all connected. Another huge growth sector is government. This is a 57% increase, which is pretty good. We need to be 50% better governed. So I want to say what's missing in this picture of jobs that are on the increase is any sort of practical, value-added, providing for our needs kinds of jobs. Yeah, I mean, it does provide for our needs to take care of, you know, geriatric care and so on. I don't mean to say that, but the things we eat, the things we use on a daily basis, the things that our lives require, seem to be off the picture. You know, not in the picture as far as the overall job figures are concerned. Was that sorry?
State jobs seem to be increasing, but our manufacturing is
Yeah.
offshore. It's gone.
It's gone. And that's partly why we're looking at a so-called jobless recovery.
Yes.
In older recoveries, maybe the workforce there are a lot of layoffs, but then as more investment comes into the picture, then people can go back to the factory or whatever. Now the factory's not there. So we've gotten ourselves in a pretty rugged situation.
But I would have to say, I think you're kidding yourself if you thought factory jobs were good jobs. There are some manufacturing jobs that pay well, but the bulk of them don't, and there are quite a few factory jobs like in Torrington that are in some of the industrial parks that the jobs are being given to Lark and all those, and those people are being paid piecework.
Yeah, that's, but there did used to be, and this had to do with a group of organizations that a lot of people like to think ill of, namely the labor unions. When the unions were strong and insisting, and we had a counterbalance to that runaway power of big capital.
But
We
no,
lost
labor
that,
unions-
and in many cases, the unions themselves
They
shot
raised
themselves
all
in the
votes,
feet. But
too.
what's that?
They raised all votes, even if you didn't belong to a union. If you if you worked in a similar industry, in order to keep the union out, they would pay better.
And you might start at some sort of crummy low pay, but you had the hope because the union job structure was there that stick it out, and pretty soon,
if there was, it depends on what area you're looking at, but
which industrial sector as well.
Because if it isn't unionized, then forget it.
If I may put things in a little perspective again, I studied trends since the 70s. Well, I studied trends even farther than that, but economics is what counts here. And we're talking about employment and unemployment. The thing to keep in mind, if you look at the 60s or 70s, very few households had two wage earners.
That's it.
Almost every household had one wage earner working 40 hours a week. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's the way households should be. I mean, if you go back to our natural selves, a natural economy, you'd have both people in a, quote, household or a hut hold or whatever you want to call it, but both people working about 20 hours in a comparable kind of thing. And in the 60s and 70s, we got to that kind of model, if you will, 40 hours a week with one person doing that and another person concentrating on other things. And that provides plenty of time for leisure, for community, and for all kinds of other things. And the problem
for napping, for visiting, I mean,
right. And the problem is now is that, even as of course corporate media is going to put those unemployment figures out there along with stock and what have you, because they want to create such a demand for work that we're always busy working. But the problem is that wages have not kept up with everything else. So whether it's a market, whether you're working in manufacturing, whether you're working in healthcare, whatever you're working on, wages have tracked way below GDP or most other things. Certainly it's tracked way below housing costs, it's tracked way below healthcare costs, it's tracked way below education for going on 40 years now.
Yeah.
And that's what creates such a big problem. Not particularly what kind of job it is, but the fact that the wages have lagged behind everything else, and it creates a huge demand on working as opposed to other things that we ought to be doing.
Do you want to speculate any sort of causal level as far as that trend is concerned, or would you rather leave that alone?
Well, I don't want to. Like I said, I wrote a huge book on this, and I don't.
Yeah.
I could start taking off, but I just want to mention that because the idea. I want to try to bring it into the idea of why we should be focusing on small communities.
Yeah. I mean, I stood before many classrooms and said something like, you want to know how our economy's changed? When I grew up, we lived well on one income. I mean, that much people are living, I would say the average median is kind of worse off than we were on two incomes. So that's a dramatic upward shift in wealth, to put it from that point of view, because those are human beings, life energies, turning some kind of value. And as far as our living standard is concerned, we're getting about half as much out of it. So it doesn't take complicated statistics to look at that kind of pattern.
I don't know, it's one thing too, when you compare the 60s versus now, is we spend more money now on other things that we did in the 60s. I mean, we didn't really have cable TV for most people.
Yeah.
That's one expense we didn't have.
Yeah.
We didn't have internet. That was another expense. We were still on the silver standard and the gold standards until 1965, the gold until 1973. And that meant that our dollar
71.
was consistent. But when we went on to the fiat currency we have now, all of a sudden, things just kept freewheeling all the way through because our money has no value.
Yeah. I mean, this is another discussion, and I'd like to debate you about the gold standard, because the gold standard is absolutely as fiddly as any other kind of money. That's another story. There are good ways to devise currency systems, and some of the most interesting happened here in New England and Pennsylvania and Virginia in the colonial era. Really interesting. So it was a fiat currency, but instead of just endlessly expanding, it was accepted for your taxes. When you paid your taxes in the fiat currency, that was the end of the circulation of that currency, and they literally burnt it. So the governments that got in trouble, like Virginia, are when they got sort of sneaky and said, well, gee, what if I don't burn it, and then I'll have this much more money. So it's the extinguishment end that's missing in our currency that makes it so crazy. And all right. So a couple other random statistics. Price of gasoline. This is from U.S. Department of Energy. Interesting. This is this is, by the way, 1972, and this is in today's dollars. So that's a fudgy kind of calculation anyway. But
holy crap.
Can I make a comment about that?
Please.
I always get a kick out of people talking about the price of gas. I mean, everything is just so artificial.
Yeah.
It's all so many subsidies and
Speculators.
And hidden costs,
Yeah.
Costs that are paid by our government or our military.
What we call externalities. Yeah.
So there's really no comparison, I don't think, from one.
No, but I mean, one thing that's clear is it's not going down. If people have tuned into the peak oil argument doesn't say we're running out of oil. It says we're running out of cheap to extract oil. So we're putting more in. I mean, the tar sands in Alberta, this pipeline thing is about, are the most expensive oil to recover. And they leave environmental devastation worse than the coal mining in Virginia.
And now we got fracking.
Fracking. So in other words, we're having to put a whole lot more of our wealth into extracting that oil. So in a way, it's natural that the price rises, and it will only continue to rise.
But you know what's scary?
We've got to put a whole lot more in to get that little squeeze of oil out.
You know what's scary though? You look at Cumberland Farms, are right next to you, and they hold about 1,000 gallons of oil or gasoline in each one of those tanks.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now they could have a full tank of gas, right? And they bought the fuel from the distributor. They didn't even get done emptying it. All of a sudden the price goes ding, 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 ding right up. Well, it's like, why? You didn't even come back and get a refill yet. How can you add up the price? Well, because that's what our boss told us to do.
Yeah. It's like Gary's saying,
I mean, that's silly.
It's beyond supply and demand. Although there are kinds of supply and demand issues that are part of the mix. Heating oil. This is just since 2010. We've seen this kind of rise. I suppose I've been mostly not in New England during this period, but evidently it got a whole lot more expensive in 2010 to heat your house in the winter if you've got an oil stove. And that's not going down. I love this. It's a little bit blurry, but it's so graphically clear. I mean, I remember when 89 cents seemed like a lot to pay for a loaf of bread. Like, what? It should be 39 cents. We used to go to the movies when I was a kid for 25 cents. This dates me. This was in the 50s. And my father used to complain. He'd say, this is crazy. We used to go to the movies for 5 cents. And we got Buck Rogers, too. This is dramatic visual. I can't say that it's based on really great economic calculation, but it does kind of fit my rough experiential data.
That's the actual experience the average person feels
Yeah.
every single time.
I mean, to me, I remember when $20 used to be a lot of money. Now 100 is the new 20, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I know. You used to be able to buy a comic book for 35 cents.
Yeah,
Today?
we got 25 cents a week allowance, and we spent it all on candy because we weren't allowed to have candy. 5 candy bars for 25 cents, mind you.
How about 19 cents a gallon for gas?
19 cents a gallon when I was first driving as a
Yeah,
teen.
me too. We must be the same age, but they pumped it for you. You got a
That's
glass
right.
and
Wiped
you
your
got acid
windows and checked your oil.
green stamps. Yeah.
And for green stamps,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. So, if we think about value, actual value apart from dollars, that's a tremendous amount of wealth that used to be accessible to ourselves that no longer is. So we might think about where that's gone. Next slide. Global finance. We've seen the rise of global banks. We have our own national version, but evidently they are all closely linked since a great deal of trillions of our bailout money went into Europe and other places.
Yeah.
I started out with a quote. As I mentioned, I did economic anthropology. This is from a highly placed trader in London who shall remain nameless. I don't know the name. Spoke this to British economic anthropologists in a state of sort of candidness and frustration. We can say that, but to have someone in that position make the comment that the entire global economic system is a Ponzi scheme, no one believes anybody's numbers because there's so much fraud, there's so much fakery. LIBOR scandal, for example, some people have maybe heard about that. I won't get into it, but the scandals are just nonstop. J.P. Morgan is now in a big scandal for having misrepresented to the public its quarterly earnings by many billions, hundreds of billions. I should have written it down. I didn't. But anyway, it's just nonstop. It's nonstop.
I like that.
It's what it's made out
Rich
of.
people, such a nice word, misrepresented.
There was a 1930 song that said some will rob you with a 6-gun, others with a fountain pen.
I
You know which one gets arrested, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. So, and that's in the 30s, so they've not gotten arrested all this time, and they're just, getting more and more and more and more.
It's not too big to fail, it's too big to jail.
Yeah, well, evidently, so I think if we look at global finance, we're really looking at a dangerously unstable system because some people might know this better than me, and I'm happy to hear that I got it wrong. Please correct me. Banker logic is a little bit upside down from our household finance. For a banker, the deposits we put into a bank, you think, that's good for the bank, that's a plus. No, deposits are liabilities to a banker. Loans, on the other hand, when they lend out money, those are assets. So if we look at the global finance, I know when I first heard about it, I'm like I couldn't get it straight. But now it's sort of, if you put yourself on the other side of the money equation, it kind of makes sense in a perverse sort of way. But what we've ended up with now, because finance has escaped regulation, and I don't guess this is news to anybody, but because a debt turns magically into an asset, it can be the foundation for more debt. And so we've got if you look at the global economy as one single pyramid, it's almost incomprehensible. But at every level, we've got debt pyramided on debt, on debt, on debt, because of this little twist where a debt becomes an asset. Now, when we see a crash, we see what I think I'll use this in this phrase, new phrase called a credit event. Some sort of insolvency, some sort of financial embarrassment, as they used to say in the 19th century, has occurred, and the entire pyramid that was resting on that crumbles. So this is, and now we've got the Glass-Steagall Act, which was one of the dirty business of the Clinton administration, the very last few hours of the Clinton administration, to destroy our very best banking regulation called the Glass-Steagall Act. A lot of people are aware of this. And, the fruit of a great deal of good thinking about what caused the Depression in the 30s. Well, Glass-Steagall Act regulated this peculiar form of investment called derivatives. Derivatives are like, so you've got already this curiously debt piled on debt kind of structure, and derivatives are an extra gamble and counter gamble. Each one of them, so it's like an insurance policy. The person who's, say, made a big loan to some outfit, and their exposure, as they say, is $100 billion. Well, they'll take an insurance policy with a derivative seller, like Goldman Sachs, like all the big investment banks, for some percentage of that, whatever they negotiate. They'll make a premium, like we make a premium on our life insurance policy. And if the borrower defaults, then the derivative seller is on the hook for that money, which is another cascade of the derivative. Nominal value of derivatives is something like 4 times the gross domestic product of the entire world. So it's debt spiraled into absurdity. Like this London trader said to the economic anthropologist, the debt is so mind-boggling that there's no conceivable path to solvency. it's dingy, it's crazy. So again, I'd say let's face facts. Let's know what's going on out there. So derivatives also can become assets, and you get the picture of this absolutely wild situation up there. So how many of these so-called assets are bad debts? We don't know. We know that people involved in the subprime mortgage fraud knew that many of those borrowers were unqualified. Did they advertise that? No. They bought more derivatives to insure themselves against a loss. So the system rewards hiding the fact of potentially unqualified borrowers and just piling more on. So a credit event, this is the new euphemism. I don't know how new, I've just run into it in the last few months. A default, an insolvency, currency crisis, all those kinds of things that make borrowers say, oops, I can't pay it back. When something like that happens, a chunk of the pyramid caves in, and assets evaporate.
Same as Joe's credit card debt, too.
Credit card debt is it's part of the pyramid. It's right, we're getting, at least I'm getting a lot of cheap credit card solicitations again in the mail after a period of not getting them. So that means they're reaching out again to try to sell more credit. By the way, subprime car loans are the hottest new product. Yep. You can get a car loan now, and the auto business is booming because somebody at the policy level wants to see more cars sold and see stimulus in that end of the business. So, what do you do when you've got a credit event? Well, obviously, if you've been paying attention the last few years, you save the bankers. That's your first consideration because they're too big to fail. So what that means is you divert public money in the direction of the people who have the most money in the world. Does that make sense? Which means, strangely enough, so that means you cut benefits. That's one way of doing it. Yeah, please.
Actually, I knew about it happening, but your analysis on the website I thought was excellent. Was Cyprus, where they're attempting to take 6% out of everyone's bank account.
Yeah. Now I need to update that on the website because now one of the scandalous parts of it. So Cyprus, they're just saying, hey, we don't, the Cyprus banking sector is 3 times larger than the GDP of the country. So, I mean, there's no way the country can afford to bail out the bank. So they've gone to the EU, and the original plan was take 6.75% from the small depositors, of which there are predictably more. Small is 100,000 euro, which is about $130, and take, 10%, the original deal, 10% from the larger investors. But those small investors, just like us with FDIC, those small investors are insured by the government. So there was such a pushback from the public and people of intelligence that idea was completely scotched. The Cypriot Parliament voted against it. Now they're just going to drain the above 100,000 depositors, but they're still. I mean, that maybe you're going to catch the mega rich who can afford it, but you're also catching a lot of, people who had small businesses and put their savings into this bank.
Cyprus is a tax shelter.
It's a tax shelter, but it's also regular people live there and put their savings into it, because you're, I mean, 120,000 in a deposit is not a vast sum of money. You know what I mean? I know it's become an offshore, like Cayman Islands kind of money stash, money laundry.
Thinking about was that what now what's created is people really all over the world now see this precedent set and are less trusting that when they put money in the bank, they're going to be able to get it all back.
It's so worse. It's actually slightly worse than that. I started following through with this, and it turns out, according to a couple of well-respected, if unorthodox economic researchers, this solution was envisioned back in 2009 when the G20 got together in Basel, Switzerland, home of the central bank of central banks, the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, and said, no, we need to, in 2009, right, so right after the crash, we need to stabilize the financial system, which means stabilize the banks, evidently, for these folks. And they created, or envisioned at least, that under certain conditions, depositors were fair game. Technically, depositors, from their point of view, are unsecured creditors of the bank. So, believe it or not, derivatives, crazy as they are secured because you pay that premium. So, this whole derivative bubble is going to be paid off in that kind of crisis before depositors. Sorry, I mean, I hope. It's actually scary, and I say better to know. So when the bubble bursts, the vast sums of money are sucked out of circulation, and the point is, the people who get hurt the worst are not the people at the top of the system. They're the people. It's like the rocks tumble down the pyramid and hit the people standing around the bottom, not the people who were players in the game who defended themselves with derivatives and whatnot.
And the worst part of it is the people at the bottom are demonized.
Yeah.
They're not on top of it all because that makes it acceptable to look the other way.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know, there's jobs out there.
It makes it acceptable not to see the injustice. I know.
Well, there's jobs out there, but they don't really want to. I know of a job up there, and like, well, that's 20 miles away and that person doesn't have a car.
Or they've got a car and the payment.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard about a tutoring job when I was unemployed, and to drive to the place, it was so low paid, to make the round trip, which is 50 miles, would have actually eaten up all but about $20 of,
Sure.
Like, wait a second.
Well, they should get a second job if it isn't enough. I'm like, something, some of these people that are working these low-paying jobs that don't even give you enough to be above the poverty line, you're demonizing them as food, because they're on food stamps or whatever assistance. They're working 40 hours a week. Isn't it really sad that they don't make enough to be above the poverty level? Well, they should get a second job. I said, do you realize that these people are on schedules that change weekly? How do you get a second job?
It's a scandal in the United States. The whole idea of the
So
working
demonize
poor in our country, considering our traditions, is scandalous on the face of it.
I think what's even more sad is the unworking poor who want to work, like I said, about the disabled.
Yeah,
Because here we are, good majority of us live way below the poverty line.
with intelligence, with abilities,
We got
with
good
skills. I know, but now you got to be last in line because now there's all kinds of able-bodied people who are out of work too. I mean, this is what we are being impoverished on a mass scale.
So I mean, don't forget now, China. If they really wanted to, why don't they someone come in and hire us? I mean, after all,
Well,
there's
there's
all these factories and everything. I bet they can get the land cheap, right?
China's been buying up assets in the United States. What else is it going to do
Heck,
with
they
its
already, we
dollars?
already put
So a lot of us might be working for the Chinese and not know it.
Hillary Clinton in 2011 put the United States up for second mortgage to China.
Really? That's yeah.
That's pretty scary.
The last statement you have there, I
Um,
don't quite feel that that's true. I feel that I'm definitely in the game, not that I signed up for the game, but I feel like I'm on the front row as a pawn.
yeah. I see your point. Yeah,
We are the game.
yeah. But you didn't, as a pawn, you didn't make any of the decisions that resulted in your
When they
present.
create the chessboard, we just inadvertently find ourselves on it.
Yeah, I mean the pawns are in chess. They're just like sort of pushed
We are
around.
indispensable.
Garrett.
Something I'd like to see more discussion, awareness, whatever, about is, I mean, and I don't know what the percentage is, but of the banking, investment bankers and all that, what percentage are doing nothing but gambling? They're
Well-
doing nothing productive, and they're making lots of money if they're successful, and they're just sucking money out of the system, and they literally are doing no productive work.
Well,
I just think we're too polite.
I think there's I think the talk, I mean, you're not going to hear it on the nightly news. You're not going to hear it on NPR.
Right.
There's a book written in the 90s called Casino Capitalism by a very interesting American-born French economist called Susan George. And as far as I know, she's the one who created that phrase, casino capitalism. And so, I mean, people have been tracking it as it's happened. It's just that you've got to look in the corners, of the media world in order to find that information. I lived up in Canada for 4 years, and I can tell you there's a lot more news up there that we don't get down here.
We're trying to find something to drink.
Something to drink? There's apple juice and coffee and tea over on the table.
I'll find it.
Can you get there?
Gotta get around here first.
Yeah, there's a little table over in the corner.
okay.
See?
I guess what I'm getting at is sort of like this, I eat at a diner regularly, and to hear the conversation of,
Oh, yeah.
grousing about people on welfare or about this or that.
Yeah.
But there's never any grousing about these, people who are gambling these huge amounts of
I
money,
know.
making tons of money, sucking money out of our economy in huge amounts.
Yeah. There's an anthropologist, very smart fellow, recently deceased, one of his comments was, a mark of the success of power is invisibility. They can afford to be, hide out behind the scenes. We don't know. We know the front men, like, photogenic fellow like Obama. So, I mean, and just to kind of round out the picture, it is these gambler, big-time bankers who do create our money, and this is a line from the Constitution, and regulate the value thereof. So they've got it coming and going. And I'm saying this because I think we tend, when we make ourselves feel more helpless, when we think in terms of money, well, how can I do X, and unless I get more money? Money is a very flexible and indeterminate substance. Energy, intelligence, I think we can put our minds together and be surprised at the level of power to move society that we've actually got. The money situation is tricky, though. I don't know. Small banks generally are safer than big banks because what they're doing, they're loading their derivatives into the same units that have small depositor accounts, because then the FDIC will presumably be on the hook to bail those out. So a small bank, like maybe the community bank here, is not going to be so heavily involved in derivatives and so on, and it's less likely to put any of us in the predicament of losing a chunk of our deposits. So that seems to be the wise analysis at the time as far as money is concerned. Oh, I had this is a punchline. Anyway, it's
Wait, I know.
thanks.
We'll play
Oops,
Jeopardy.
now I'm going backwards.
Yep, the question.
Yeah, where's that dude? Yeah. Did I?
What is the way to fight that?
Yeah. I think, and this is one of the buzzwords that's going about these days, relocalize some of our supply lines insofar as we can. And we'll have to probably reach into a regional framework in order to do that. But some of these pictures, I mean, everybody recognizes, I suppose, the upper left hand, that's our Whiting Mills, is already doing this kind of incubation where you can, if you've got a good idea, you can go in and for a very reasonable price get a great space and a community of other people who are making real physical things, adding value to things. That's the kind of thing we need to see. And I understand there's spaces available for not very much money. And the upper right is a micro hydro system. It's hard to maybe see quite from where you're sitting, but this is a pipe going down a hill from some kind of water source, powering these turbines. Some of them are like this big, and if you've got water coming downhill through a pipe this big, breaks off into 4 little nozzles and turns the turbine. You know, you think of the old water wheels, you know, I don't know, hundreds of feet in diameter, but these new microhydro turbines can be literally this big, with a pipe this big, and produce the electricity to run a house. It's fabulous technology. It's been developing for a while. There's huge number of mom and pop businesses all over the web selling microhydro. Selectman Renzullo recommended, there's hopefully going on now a feasibility study here in Winsted for applying some kind of microhydro. We've got water. We can do this. It's really, really interesting, and the innovations are phenomenal. I've got a bunch of links on the website. This one guy made his microhydro system out of an old washing machine. And the whole thing, he's powering, I think I can't. Check the links on the website, you'll see what I mean. But he literally made, and it's a how-to take an old washing machine and turn it into a microhydro and power your computer in your house and the whole thing. So there's huge amount of variations in these systems. This is a nice little homemade job, but I picture it because it's so feasible with $300 or $400 and even less if you've got an old washing machine and a few people who have mechanical skills.
Just like this mill here probably originally had a water mill.
Oh yeah, the river's right here.
They would probably just use it to run the machinery. Same thing I'm sure with Whiting Mills too, with the Still
That's
River.
what this town rose to its state of prosperity, and even through our present maybe lack of prosperity, we can see all these beautiful buildings didn't just happen on the scene. This was a prosperous place, and it was the water power. That hill from the lake down to that side of Main Street had 7 different. Virginia knows better.
I don't know how many, but there were.
But
a lot.
yeah,
It
all
started off
just
with
straight down there,
grain
and
stuff
these
like that.
just everything, and the newspaper, and all kinds of things.
Right, and actually though, that was the Whiting Mills was the beginning of the end because it was built on steam. You don't have to be right on the water.
No.
And they thought that was the greatest thing, but that meant that manufacturing didn't have to be in a place like Winsted.
No, but it also means, if we want to look at it from another perspective,
Right.
it's like the difference between an oil gusher in Texas and oil shale. You've got to put a whole lot more front end investment in to run it on steam, and you've got a whole, potentially
Right, what it did,
polluting after effects that.
right, what it did was be able, not so much Winston, because we didn't have the cotton mills, but it was able to reduce the cost of transportation from the south and things like that. Yeah, that's why you end up with cotton mills down south.
So I want to say with Whiting Mills and with this is not our farmers market, I've only been here in cold weather, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens when there are leaves on the trees and when there's a farmers market on the green. But I mean, it's not so. It's these kinds of a farmers market, and I understand it's doing well. I heard at this. Anybody else at the small growth workshop that was a couple months ago? But the fellow who is involved, a fellow who's involved in organizing the farmers market said, this is our third year, and for the first time, farmers are calling us and saying, "Are you opening up this year?" In the past, we've had to call them and kind of drum up business. So now, the vendors are calling them and saying, "Hey, you doing it this year? Do we have this outlet this year?" So this is a tremendous resource that can a whole lot of kinds of feasible, small-scale craft and production activities can feed into something like the farmers market. It's a great resource. This is a small machine shop. There's one guy and lots of big machines. It could be a wood shop. I have a friend in Colorado whose wood shop looks a lot of great big machines and just one guy. There has to be, with the historical background of this town, there had to be people with mechanical and wood and craft skills of all kinds. And they're probably, or at least some of them, are either unemployed or not working in a way that utilizes those skills. What can we do? What little things can we do to take advantage of those skills?
Well,
Who's, dad or uncle or, granddad even. It's occurred to me that while we still have that older generation of people who know what to do with a lathe, while those people are still living, what if we plugged in teenagers with those old guys and said,
well, you know what the problem is? It's twofold in this day and age. Is that everybody wants things cheap. When you've got craftsmen, you pay much more per piece.
If it's a matter of not just surviving, but of optimistically engaging in work with others and creating value in your community, you can find the price point that your community members can afford. We've got wetlands out here. I bet you we can cut these reeds and turn them into brooms for cheaper, or at least as cheap as you can get them in Walmart. And we could call it the community broom. Let's clean up the community and have a little bit of a campaign promoted at the farmers market. Seriously. We've got the raw materials. Do we have access to the land? I don't know, but I bet the Winchester Land Trust would be interested in some of these products and would say, well, hey, nobody's doing, if you don't do any harm to the land, sure, gather a few reeds and, whatever, and make baskets. I mean, we've got this is why we're in a much more fortunate position than a big city, because we've got tremendous natural resources around us. It's occurred to me that up in these hills, there've got to be, and some of you may know this, I don't know, there've got to be mushrooms, there've got to be medicinal herbs. Who knows about this kind of thing? What would it take to find out and to access? And, maybe wash them off and tie a little ribbon and put them in a cute package and take them to the farmer's market, or maybe take them over to Bob and Sue's store. And I know there's standards and so on, a little bit of hoops that had to be jumped through, but
I still think that one of the other things is too, is I'm sure you probably noticed that there's a lot of people in this town, especially because it's a community college, that, have a lot of skills in acting and, radio work and things like that, like I told you. But, I mean, for me to take Pink Rose Communications and put it up on the internet, it would be the most immediately feasible option because, as I told you, the Federal Communications Commission would charge you $3,000 filing fee
Yeah.
And
No, this is why the web is so great. It's going to be.
I mean, because I would like to see, the people of this town that have some artistic skills in acting and radio drama, and maybe radio comedy.
Have you heard of a black box theater? That's what there's you basically create a space that's painted black, and there's all kinds of, it's all kinds of actors and so on, set designers, so on, musicians and so on, who create kinds of productions for those spaces. Well, it struck me, I don't know, that's completely unmanageable space on the other side of this building.
I'm thinking of that, but.
I know. But we do, I mean, if it's not this building, we've got fabulous built environment that's underutilized in this town. And the kinds of things that can happen through the arts are also productive. I don't think we need to look at that as...
And that was one of the things that you showed is growing.
Yeah.
The arts.
Yeah.
Arts.
So there's a lot of, and Michelle mentions community college, yeah, they've got...
Actually, the Winston Furniture, I've talked to that gentleman who owns that. He may very well put a large art center in there.
Great.
Well, I know, I think he said he wanted to bookend like the Whitey Mills thing, sort of having, one,
Yeah.
pretty much filling that up, then doing similar there, and then there's that beautiful path behind, which I love.
Revitalization East, revitalization West.
Right,
Yeah.
and, an arts community, because I know like Oil City in Pennsylvania, that's where my son moved. It's very similar to Winston, but some of the same stuff. And they've invited the arts in, and they do that. It's an artist colony there, and that's something that I think it's sort of organic here. I think that if you go with the flow and go with what's in your environment, I think is.
Yeah.
It's already there. Let's make use of it.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of a permaculture principle. Of,
Yeah, really.
Anybody, yeah. Well, so I just want to point out one other photo here, which is this kind of ultra low cost greenhouse, where I mean all kinds of things can happen in a greenhouse, and this is just take something that'll bend and stick in the ground and throw some plastic over it, and you can grow stuff.
Is there land in Winston that could be used as a community garden?
There is a community garden.
Is there a community garden?
There is.
Right up here. It's right. Charlene knows about it. She drove me by it. But I was too new to even know exactly.
It's out of town.
Oh,
You gotta have a vehicle. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I noticed.
Oh, you mean what used to be the Core Farm?
One of the things I noticed.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
One of the things I
Speaking
noticed.
of going with the flow.
Yeah, it was right across from the pest house, which was.
Curious, not a good location
Yeah, when
somehow.
they put the poor people, they always figured they brought sickness, so we had the pest house there too.
So I want to make the point with this slide that there's a lot going on in the world. Fixing the Future is a film we might look at if this group cares to continue to meet. There will never be any dues asked of you. There will always be refreshments. Perhaps we can potluck some of the refreshments, but these are things going on, and slow money, by the way, is a form of community-based investment, which is now actually happening. They're actually funding. They're pretty well focused on food-related kinds of businesses, but I don't see why the basic idea could not be applied to other value-added kinds of businesses going on in the world. Cooperatives, go co-op. Cooperatives are a great way of organizing so that a pool of small contributions can be recognized on the receiving end of the business as well. So some people put money, a few people have to put a little bit of money in order to make anything happen in these days, but it doesn't have to necessarily be a lot. Maybe it could be through an investment pool. But some people have skills to contribute and not money. Some people have hours of labor they're willing to contribute. In a co-op, you can recognize, you can value all of those various kinds of contribution, and then if you put it over the top and it actually becomes a producing kind of enterprise, then those rewards are shared out among the contributors, even if you didn't contribute money. Because somebody's life energy, I would say, is at least as valuable as money.
There's local currency too.
Local currency, I know, I should have put that on here. That's a
Great
really...
Barrington do local currency in their stores?
Great
I
Barrington-
think they do.
Now, Great Barrington's doing probably the commonest... There are an infusion of local currencies, and there's an interesting film that looks... couple of interesting films that look at local currencies. One of the oldest is Ithaca Hours, but they do, I mean, they increase the circulating medium. They're a multiplier effect.
Last year, you told us that the local currency around the Remington factory in
historical
New York,
case.
and people stacked up on the local currency, and the factory closed, and the currency was worthless.
Well, that's the back end of the story. But for 30 years, the currency created a high standard of living in that area. So
I think that there's three huge holes in what we've been saying tonight.
could I just do one more slide? We still have another half hour of our allotted time. So, I mean, the point of what I want to point out is there's a lot going on. There's a lot of really interesting experiment going on in the world. Some of it already showing signs of success. I came out here from Boulder, Colorado, which is very much tuned into these kinds of initiatives. It has a slow money investment group where those who happen to have their wealth in money and who have a sense of the value of the community are putting some part of their pooled wealth into this sort of development. And slow money because it's not slow in the sense of you're not looking for returns every quarter. You're willing to say, hey, I'll invest in somebody I know, somebody whose farm I can visit. And because I've got that level of trust and access and accountability, I'm willing to wait a little bit longer for my return on my investment. So a lot of stuff going on, and what I want to, my little pop-up there was, let's get together next week and we can talk about what's the best time, what's the best day, and there are a wealth of ideas we can consider. I love the idea of looking at historical lifeways, and we happen to have a fine local historian in our midst this evening. Because if we understand how, this is one way we might learn about medicinal herbs, because somebody finds a letter from a great-great-great-grandmother written in 1840 that says, I've been gathering pennyroyal up at such and such a place. How people utilize the land in simpler times may have ideas. I think Shirley will have ideas that we can use in this new kind of economic endeavor that I and others are talking about. So another topic, community funding, the slow money and other kinds of movements of that kind. There are even local stock exchanges coming up now. One of the sort of gurus of this is going to be in Boulder in a couple of weeks to give a big seminar, which I won't be able to attend.
I want to hear that you're starting to sort of wrap up. I want to say that I'm organizing a showing with the group called GMO Free Connecticut, who's active on this issue, of course, and we're going to organize an event in Winstead to show that film Genetic Roulette. And so, just along the lines, you're talking a lot about a lot of things, but I'm going to, I'm gonna be doing what I do, which is trying to sponsor things so people can come and learn about it. You know, some of these things, I heard you talking about the bank, you know, the financial industry, and I think to myself, how many people take the time to write an email to Blumenthal and Murphy about this? I mean, we have Elizabeth Warren, who's out there trying to do the thing. These guys are all over the gun thing. I understand that's a big front page issue now, but they need to hear from us regularly, and all it takes is a couple of simple emails. I mean, it's easy to get to them, and they do tally, you know, how many people are calling them about which issue, and they do jockey their schedules around or their priorities around depending on that. So if GMO is like one simple thing that's before, that's national. This is I mean, there needs to be federal legislation on this too, but you do the same thing with Jay Case. I've already talked to Jay at the state capitol 2 weeks ago when they had the hearings on this, and he's supportive of it. And our senator in this area, Clark Chapin, a couple of emails. You know, yours in Litchfield, a couple of emails. Boom, they hear it. You know, you don't have to go out and protest on the street, but you know, when they hear that we're having films and people
It doesn't have to be a long letter either.
and it doesn't have, just say, please support the bill. You don't even have to know the number of the bill. Please support the bill on labeling GMO. They know what it is. Their aides know exactly what it is. And it goes in that pile, and they see which constituent is saying what about something. And believe me, it's you know the rule. They hear 10 people something from 10 people. They like, oh, it didn't. So if we easily can flood them with 100 emails from people in this area who think GMO labeling is important, they're gonna like think about that. Anyway, that's my thing. So watch for the GMO thing, and we'll send you all. You know, if you give us your email, it's getting easier. We did send out postcards for this, but help us with your email labels, because obviously it's a lot easier for us, and it's a lot less expensive for us to send out an email to you saying the genetic roulette movie is at town hall on da-da-da, and so you can come and be part of that, even if you just come for a few minutes, because again, numbers, you know, I can get Jay to come to that. If he sees this many people or 50 people there, he says something. In his mind, he'll say, I'm going to the legislature, I'm going to vote for this when it comes out of committee. So, anyway.
Do we have emails?
Question.
We gave you mine, but I don't know if you could read it.
It's always great to get a group of people together to watch them.
Yeah.
Is it ever feasible to make it available to watch through an online site for people who can't make it?
You know, yes. Good idea. I'm not that techno, but we have a great kid from
But also,
Melbourne who
there's
can help us.
permissions and royalties and stuff,
I
depending
think some
on.
of these nonprofit stuff, though, you can get that pretty easily.
Could it be considered a virtual meeting?
I-
I mean, if you have permission
Maybe
to show it at a meeting?
you're already starting to say things I don't really get, but the point is, if you want to help me understand that more, and or
Just get that a lot of people who might be interested
No,
won't
no,
step out of the door to
I get it, but so write me an email and maybe I'd say, okay, you wrote me about that, and I'll get it to John to be sure that, you know, we do something like that, whatever that thing is. I know I'm still a little old fashioned, come out and join us and see, but maybe that's another vehicle. Sure, I'd be interested in learning how to do that and doing that, as well as having people come out.
Well, I have films here on the list of ideas for future meeting.
Yeah.
There's so many really great documentaries.
Oh, yeah.
Out there.
There's really.
I think a meeting on co-ops, the ins and outs of co-ops would be a kick, and it would be an encouragement to see the kinds of things that have come from these cooperative
Why
actions.
can't we have a co-op like the Berkshire Co-op, Bob? Now everybody, poor Bob's like everybody's, but you know, I
It's a lot
buy.
of work. That's the thing.
Yes, but I would buy in a share of the Winston Co-op or the
I would too.
Health Food Corner Co-op.
Right. It's a
You
6
know.
o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning kind of deal where you got to separate potatoes and carrots into bags. and
Yeah.
it's a lot
Yeah,
of work.
yeah.
And I couldn't just do it myself.
No. Well,
I
that's the idea of a
But
co-op.
I would certainly support it if
Yeah.
we wanted to do
The
it.
Well, how do they
Berkshire
do it
Co-op,
at
when
the
it
Berkshire
started,
Co-op?
the
Yeah.
first few years, they didn't have paid staff. Every member had to, part of their membership was 2 hours of work a month, which is not
Extra money
that
or what?
bad,
What
you
was
know.
it gonna be, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get somebody.
Or
from
your
the
money anywhere.
Berkshire Co-op down here and talk.
Talk
You
to
know,
us, yeah.
I bet we could.
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting thing about this sort of, I mean, I'm calling it a movement. It's really not that singular. There's all different sort of,
But I mean, people before.
but people are very enthusiastic
Bob
and
was
love the
here,
idea. And
people would drive from Winstead to either Guido's or the Berkshire Co-op from Winstead. So Winstead's the hub of this area. Winstead should have its own
well,
co-op.
and historically
that will
it was, right?
That will bring people in from Litchfield, New Hartford, Barkhampton to
If
shop.
anybody wanted to get
here.
involved with it, just stop at the health food store. I would
Well.
certainly consider it.
Yeah, well, we need to get more community organization behind it first, Bob, before we lay it at your feet.
With 2 hours of work a week, if you have a lot of underemployed or
Yeah.
unemployed citizens, this is a way for
And
them
you
to
make
be
it-
able to be
Can I
part
make a
of
comment
something.
on one of the college students that's also lost in a Polish university? Now, we have a big college community in this town
yeah,
with students that are always looking for internships or community-related
Great
based
point.
services.
yeah.
Can we pull them into like some kind of projects to help
Yeah.
rebuild?
That's a huge resource. It really is, and
Yeah.
it's not very. It doesn't seem. You know, I tried to look up the phone number when I was first here for the community college. I wanted to call and find out because it was bad weather or something had been canceled, and I could not find the central phone number in the standard little phone book we've got.
It's very
Well,
hard.
like,
Which
when
is
you're
like,
talking about
what?
co-op, we could take the community college and use it like a co-op and integrate it into our society and try to make it more sustainable.
Yeah,
They have a person there in the science department that's involved with the farmer's market.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tara
Homework.
Tara Holmberg.
Yeah.
So that
Right.
might be a contact.
that'd be great. Yeah. And there's when we need kinds of research, and I think one of the items I want to suggest for future get-togethers is we can study ourselves. I'm deeply trained in all kinds of social research, but community-based self-study. It's not about somebody coming in and.
Here's her book. It's so marvelous.
It's not about somebody dropping in
It's a great book.
and writing a book and leaving. When you study yourself, you ask the kinds of questions you want to know for the kinds of ideas you have in mind. And this is something that I think also could interface with the community college and
Yeah,
people
because
involved
the
in the
thing
social sciences
The
area.
issue with
Well,
budget
let's do it.
problems
Yeah.
Let's do it.
and
Can we start doing it
lack
this
of
year?
economic
Co-op.
resources, if there was some way we could pull
Build
the
a community
resources
garden.
together and
Go non-GMO.
try to do some kind of projects to develop this town so people would want to come
Yep,
and shop and come and visit.
yep. Well, that's
So you know what my thing is, tourism eventually, that's part of it. That's part of it, people coming into the town, us being the gateway, the foothills of the Berkshires. I think we need to build that up, but it's all these pieces put together, co-ops and
yeah.
it's all part of it.
It's going to come from us, and it's going to come from our shared intelligence and heart, if I may say. I mean, could come in.
I've worked on Main Street in the old newspaper building for over 15 years now, and I think something that's really encouraging, I hear a lot of grumbling about, but haven't heard any people appreciating that we're going to extend the median and
Yeah.
the sidewalks on Main Street, and I've seen such a change just in that couple of blocks where I work.
Well, thank you,
Yeah, I agree
because
with
I've
you.
had
I
to
mean,
argue with
This
people about
downtown
this.
area is definitely started to develop real nicely with the
Yeah.
little walks and
But
especially during around the holiday time with the decorations, it kind of makes a little bit of
Oh, and the
a nice
parks.
shopping atmosphere for outside folks.
Right, and the thing is, I hear grumbling from the end of town that doesn't have it, and they say, oh, the signs are blocked by the trees and bloom, and I'm like, you know something, it's not even coming down all the way to you, so what are you worried about? Oh, we're just a postcard, that's all you care about. It's,
But,
no.
I mean, for people who don't spend a lot of time, like on Main Street, I'd say, come down like in front of the old newspaper building, right, just before the corner of the Y, and look down toward the Catholic Church, an afternoon when the sun is starting to go down, and just look at the colors and the trees all around us. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
And what I've tried to tell people is there are more businesses in town than there have been in a long time. These stores are not as empty as they used to be. I bet if they counted, I think you would find that in the
Yeah, I
last
agree
couple
with
of
you.
years.
That's what the
there's a
small
lot
growth people were
more.
saying. They were saying, well, there's not smart growth. Sorry, there's very few small towns all the small towns would be envious of our occupancy rate.
Exactly.
This is unusual.
But there's still room for improvement as far as retail development.
There's still great spaces that are not being
There's a lot
utilized.
of unused factories we could do something with that looks horrendous. There could be some more, like, say, toy shops, more clothing retail, different tastes that would draw different types of people. That would probably help economic growth in this town.
Yeah.
You can't try and compete with the big box stores. They're here, so let's do something different. That's, you know what I mean?
Well, that's the way to compete.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
how you compete, really, actually. That's, there is a toy store in Torrington, Toy Gym. They don't sell what everybody else is selling.
Uh-huh.
They have different toys, and they've been there for years. My son is 20 years and old, and I remember going down there when he was 3. So I mean, there's something it's been 17 years at least. So
How do you convince people to buy this town? That's the problem. I'm part of the merchants group in town, and we always debate that. How do we convince Winston residents to buy in Winston? They go to Torrington, and I own a health food store, I've lost several customers because they go to Canton, to the vitamin shop, because they can get their CoQ10 for 75 cents cheaper.
well, how much did they spend in
But
gas? That's
it's this mentality. It's this Walmart mentality. I don't care
I
what
think
who
that,
I
it might
heard.
be-
I'm gonna go buy it for cheaper.
I don't know if it's so much that, as there might be other stores around there that are selling other things
Yeah.
there, and then so they pick up that because it's nearby.
I can
So
tell
you
you,
need to do that.
a lot of people that want to open up business in this town, but they're so afraid because people are so apt to flee this town and go to Torrington or go to Canton.
Well, it's
And
a
I-
big
Well,
part of the culture. I mean,
Yeah.
You're
It's something
Or buy online.
it takes a certain
well,
pioneering spirit, but it's something that can be turned around, right?
I'll admit, I'm the first person to buy online.
Right.
I'll actually look for something around, and I don't know my geography very well.
If I had to find
That's
a wide width
well,
shoe.
because you can't get stuff in Main
Well,
Street.
actually, at
Yeah,
one
but
time-
you're
at
right.
one point in
Wait a
time,
minute, can I
they had
just
a
talk a
hobby
minute,
shop.
please?
Yeah, we got
You're right. If we can keep the businesses that are here and get them viable, other businesses will come in, and maybe that's where we have to start.
Right.
Instead of trying to bring things that haven't existed yet, all right, the farmer's market, but how about, I've just moved here, and what bothers me is coming down Main Street.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful, and it's a great community, it's depressed, and it's apathetic. If we work on that, let's start working what we have here, right now, because it's here. We don't have to create, and if we, excuse me, I'm talking, just let me finish, my brain won't connect if I can't talk. And if we work on what we have here and become successful, then success breeds success,
Yep.
other people will come in here, and maybe if the group does that, we'll have a success there, and then, if you have one success, it goes out in concentric circles, other successes will happen, but we have to do something with the downtown.
We have to
it's
do a lot with
apathetic.
downtown.
People have to support the downtown.
Yeah,
to
but we
make
can
the downtown
change
good.
that. We've
Yeah.
got, look at all these brains that we have in this room.
Yeah.
We can change that because it exists.
But you also
I
have
could
bad
change
policies
many
to that
things,
part.
but just by an idea, but people have to join. If we all join together, we
All right,
can
well,
change, we have power,
Control on this,
you
yeah,
know?
only because of the time. All right,
We got
so
10 more
we can-
minutes.
We don't have 10 minutes. I want to make an announcement before like Shaw leaves. On the 17th, we're having Roz Savage, who's the world renowned rower. She's rowed the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Ocean. She's the first woman to ever row all 3 of these oceans. She's going to be here in Winston to talk about rowing, but she also does it for environmental purposes. She talks about environmental challenges around the world. That's going to be at the Community College on Wednesday, April 17th. Most of you are on our list, so you'll get a postcard and or an email. And the night after, on the 18th, The trust commissioned investigative journalist, award-winning journalist Janet Reynolds to write a book about the hospital story in Winston. What happened with this fight for Winston Memorial Hospital 15 years ago. And we're going to be releasing that book, and Janet is going to come and talk about her experience. She was the investigative reporter at the Litchfield County Times during the thing in the late 90s, and then she wrote this book about it 2 years, last year. It's just finished. We're just publishing it now. So she'll be here to talk about it and to sign books. So if you're interested, that I know they're back to back. One's Wednesday night, one's Thursday night. But again, activities to come out and talk about. The hospital was a big issue in this community. It remains so. The health center and what's going on.
It's a huge resource.
It's a huge resource. We're not paying enough attention to it like we did in 1997. And, you know, we're in jeopardy of losing that if we don't pay some attention to it. So that's on Thursday, April 18th. You'll get an email about that. Not a card, actually. You'll just get an email about that. So Thursday, April 18th.
Is that here?
That's here at 7 o'clock here. And the
Roz
Roz Savage thing is at the Founders Hall, the auditorium at the Community College on Wednesday, April 17th.
So what I want to know in our last few minutes is,
Okay, I have something.
This is a nice back here we had This is our nice
can we meet next week?
Put in mind.
Can we get together and do this next week?
Sure.
And there'll be, I meant to show you the website. Website is Community in Tumultuous Times. It's a big number of words to write. See if I can get there fast. But but once you do it, you know, you don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
This is all messed up. So I'll post something in this central space here about in next Wednesday. Can we try it? And if Wednesday is not going to be a good time for people, then we'll work that out, or we'll break into smaller groups. Can we try to move on with the
picture.
good ideas? Yule.
Yeah.
That's great. Jenny recognizes them.
Yes.
Yeah. 1912. The one on the.
That's actually what it looked like in 1920?
It's actually West Main. Yeah, believe it or not.
Well, what do we do about the budget cuts that are hurting Winston's
Well,
economy?
we have to
Vote
try
yes.
another way to go at it, and
Vote yes.
I mean, it's killing the fire, it's killing EMS, it's killing police.
We gotta vote yes. We
Well-
voted no for 15 years in this town. Vote yes on the budget.
Right.
We gotta raise taxes, period. It's not like a crushing burden. It's a few bucks extra. We gotta do it. Otherwise, we're just falling apart at the
I
end.
mean, that's one of the issues of why this community is in such a
Yeah, because
economic.
that vote no crowd,
Well, you get
they're
the
the
rich
biggest mouths.
people from the,
See you, Kirk.
you get the wealthy people up on the lake that don't want it, and you want all these people that do want it because they want to make something grow in this town that could.
Well, we need to get out more people to vote. I mean, this is a, it's ridiculous.
Because the fire department's
But
budget
it's
is terrible, they all got old gear, it's a safety.
We know that, but the thing is, we're talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
less than
Somebody's
2,000
taking
people.
photos.
They talk about it in this town.
so let's people keep
This guy's
enjoy
taking
talking to
dominated
yourselves,
the
and
conversation.
let's
I talk to myself all the time. And
No, I
find
mean,
it
and
very
just, I mean
intelligent,
talking among yourselves, and we can consider ourselves officially adjourned, and I want to do this next week, and I hope lots of you do too. We can take a shorter period, we can do it however you want to do it, but let's keep talking. That's the key point at this time. Let's nurture the ideas. And
Are you the community lawyer?
no, that's Charlene.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, go ahead. Say it.
I was just gonna say, people who are still here might feel they would need certain things to happen a little differently, or what they would like to see out of this group in order to invite other people
Have
Make
you been there a
suggestions,
while?
that's all.
In Harlingen?
You know, maybe email you or,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
on the website.
From there and it's business.
We've got a contact us,
Half in one.
and we've got a,
We did a lot.
the contact us would be the best way. Please send ideas or feedback of any kind.
When we all go home to watch television.
thank you.
Thank you for coming, appreciate it, thanks Gary.
These meetings are.
Let's do it, let's do something.
You don't want category, I was gonna add on, I can get